that the solutions that come out of politicians actually fuel more inflation or reduce job availability rather than truly solving the problem?
Yeah, Dagan, this is the perfect storm of excrement for the bottom two-thirds of the economy. I mean, this is awful. And if you look back through a rearview window, since the Biden administration took over, and you say, what is the worst possible decision or policy I could have come up at this point in time? And sure enough, that's the one they picked, specifically in Ukraine. And so the problems from the war in Ukraine are just being started to felt. So in Europe, you're seeing a massive natural gas spike. So it's up, a couple thousand%. That energy cost push pushed onto fertilizer. So fertilizer, fertilizer is going to be produced about 23% less this year because of the cost of natural gas. So that's going to further exacerbate food costs. So if you look in the U.S. from 2019, your food and your energy costs are up 40 or 50%. I'd say that's a low estimate. And even the CEO of Costco was saying this a couple months ago in an interview that people are making the hard choice between feeding their family, paying their rent, and filling up their gas tank. And so you have a nonsensical green energy policy that's providing a cost push to everything that basically negates everything that the Fed is doing to try to curb inflation, and horrific policy at every turn in a crucial part of the world, particularly Ukraine and Russia, that determine food on everyone's plate worldwide, largely due to fertilizer. So this is much likely to get worse. And in terms of how this is going to play out in the election, if you look at the crosstabs of the undecided, states like Arizona, where there's 4 or 5% undecided voters, Biden strongly disapprove amongst those undecided people is close to 75%. So this is horrific for the Biden administration and for politicians in power, and it's even more horrific for those experiencing it. Literally, it's not just the bottom third or 40 or 50%. It's most likely the bottom two-thirds of the income stratosphere in our country that are being squeezed at the moment.
And James, final word to you on this. An excuse not to work, quite frankly, and also children should never have been out of school. We knew very early on in 2020, in the first few months of the pandemic, that children did not contract COVID as easily. They did not contract severe disease, and they didn't spread it as easily as adults. But again, because of the power grab by these teachers unions, and yeah, that's Randy Weingarten et al., they were kept out of school, and their lives potentially were just destroyed.
Yeah, look, these are communist tactics to go in and try to destroy your opponent. I mean, what do you do when you can't win in the form of ideas? Is you try to destroy the other person. And for these teachers unions to try to go out and get opposition research on parents who simply want their children to go to school tells you exactly who these teachers unions are. And his story came out a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times talking about how far behind children are after the pandemic, blaming COVID as if it was the disease that shut down the schools and not the policymakers. So, look, I'd say the one good thing that did come out of this is a lot of parents witnessed the woke indoctrination that a lot of their children were seeing and have since taken over a lot of school boards. So hopefully we can turn the tide on that. But, we now know who these teachers unions actually are.
I think that's the disease, the unions. Coming up. And Michael Lee, can like Lori Lightfoot or even Mayor Adams here bring Kamala Harris into the conversation? Remember, she's supposed to be the border czar, the vice president, focused on root causes. And there's no mention of her in any of these conversations.
Yeah, look, these mayors, they have sanctuary cities for a reason. They just want money. That's the only reason they're going to D.C. They don't want this problem solved. I believe that they're indifferent to the number of migrants entering their city, and this is simply an opportunity for them to get more federal funds. So, look, the left wants open borders so they can get more voters. A lot of corporate America and the establishment powers of the Republicans want cheaper labor. labor as wages are rising. So when you have that much of the power structure of the country with the vested interest of this continuing to happen, you're going to have these horrific humanitarian problems continuing over and over. You know, the fentanyl that's ravishing our country, as well as the human trafficking going on the border. It's not going to stop until you have major policy changes and really, as the Trump administration did, force people to file for asylum from Mexico, get Mexico to be a first safe nation. But that's not what the people in charge want. They want more people in our country, and it's looking like we're going to get a new Chicago of people every single year of the Biden administration.
And James, before we go, I want to housing. Goldman Sachs warning that the housing market downturn will worsen next year in 2023. This is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage is now at 5.94%, the highest since mid-June. Mike, your take on the housing market. If you want a recession, you got it right here in housing.
Yeah, housing is a perfect leading indicator for recession. If you look at building permits, housing starts, home sales, and you look at the charts of all of them, they all look eerily similar in a straight line going down into a crater. So this is a combination of a multitude of factors, definitely interest rates going up, but also the run out of stimulus money and the economy just slowing dramatically. Energy, food costs, these things have taken a larger portion of the wallet share, and now your average 30-year mortgage payment has basically doubled year over year because interest rates have jumped so significantly. Goldman calls for a 7% 30-year mortgage at some point next year. I would dispute that. Mortgages are based on a 10-year treasury. I think we start to see further yield curve inversion and mortgage rates come down somewhat from where they are now, simply because that yield curve is going to continue to get inverted. I don't see this changing in terms of, even though I'd say the 30-year mortgage rate could probably drop a little from where we are, I don't think that'll stem the housing trend, because what you have is a multiplier effect from the housing market that bleeds to the rest of the economy. So as this industry slows dramatically, it's going to further deepen the recession we are entering. So I don't think good things are to come for the housing market. However, if you're looking for some bargain prices, you probably get a better deal 6 to 9 months from now than you will today. But it's already reversed itself, and now that the average home, according to Redfin, is selling below ask, it's the first time that's happened in a couple years. So definitely the tide has turned for very much the worse in the housing market.
Right, and let me just point out, and I've said this before, the Federal Reserve created another housing bubble, and now they're going to have to manage its collapse. And when you have a precariously, dangerously over-leveraged economy, or industries, it does not take much of an increase in interest rates to send the dominoes toppling. And look no further, Mike, this is a jump ball for you. There's a front page story in the Wall Street Journal today that junk loan defaults are beginning to worry investors, that defaults on leveraged loans hit $6 billion in August, the highest monthly total since October of 2020. And I know Stephanie Pomboy has talked about the danger of junk, but this is just one of the dominoes beginning to topple.
Yeah, I'd expect credit spreads to widen out further, and you're going to start to see a lot more defaults. But this is how the Fed causes a recession. You increase the cost to borrow an over-levered company, and that increasing of cost to borrow not only slows the economy, it causes over-levered companies to default. This is something that we skipped over in the recession of 2020 during COVID because the Fed stepped in to buy junk bonds. I don't see them doing that this time around. Some sort of reorganization for credit, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, to take out some of these over-levered companies and clean up. I don't know if I call it garbage, but for reorganize. So I don't know if that's the worst thing in the long run, but definitely going to lead to some short-term pain.
Thank you so much, Michael Lee. You sit right there. Rebecca Walzer, great to see you as well. Thank you again. Coming up, President Biden.